It's now the end of the 10 a.m. turn, and Russians still coming on from the left here. Haven't yet hit the French lines, but the Prussians are having mixed success. In fact, most of their attacks are failing. They are just getting the lines and disordering. There were a couple of Russian units that assaulted along here, and they just were forced back. A few routed units behind the line there, off in the distance. And the French generally holding pretty well. You can see a few disordered French units here. But the Prussians did have one success in the Prince Anton Gardens here. And this is an important one. This is a potentially a position that the French can hold quite well. There's only this one gate here that they can attack through. The Prussians can attack through on this side, which they've done so, and they forced, again, very lucky dice rolls here. In amongst all these failures, the Prussians, got a success where it counted. And at the moment, this palace area here is unoccupied. The French couldn't bring their reinforcements up in time. Also, Prussians moving around the right here. They've crossed. There was, I think, an artillery unit here that was eliminated in an earlier attack. So Prussians pushing through around here. You can see there's a French battalion here, another one here, and that square still holding the line in the rear. But otherwise, it looks like the Prussians have managed to find a way through those French lines. Behind the lines, there are just a lot of Austrians moving up. They're very slowly. You can see off in the distance here, winding their way down this road. They're beginning to shift. You can see these formations shifting out to this left-hand side, so they can move around and then push down towards the French lines. As I said, probably, I thought it might be 11 a.m. It might be later. At the very slow pace, these columns are moving up these roads and getting into position. Okay, so it's, as I said, the end of the 10 a.m. turn. We are just on 10:20 a.m. Okay, we're just at the end of the 10:20 a.m. turn, and the Prussians are beginning to push through the outskirts of the old town of Dresden out here on the eastern side of the city. You can see the French seized the initiative and moved into the palace around the Prince Anton Gardens, but they're being surrounded by Prussians. You can see them moving around here. The Prussians were successful in an assault here. The French failed their role to stand and retreated out of the area. Elsewhere, some French disordered units. A French square here, which is being hammered on all sides by musket fire, and is down to 2 increments in the centre here. French artillery is still doing a lot of damage. These guns here are out of ammunition. That's why they've been marked as such. But elsewhere, these guns in close range and firing through the Russians out here on the left and the Austrians approaching from the south are doing a lot of fire damage. We do have up here in the north Napoleon just about to cross the bridge into the city. I need to double check the rules. He does have to pause for a moment to discuss the situation, but there is a long line of French reinforcements arriving from out on the left in the east. Elsewhere, as you can just see, the Austrians now moving up and approaching the French lines in the centre around 3 and 4 redoubt. They are taking a long time to move up. As I said in the past, they have very low movement rates. It's very slow going, and they are under artillery fire as they approach. What else is happening? That's about it. So the big story here is that the Prussians advancing through here. You can see these guys moving through, a couple of French units being left behind in the process. And one thing I haven't done yet is roll for recovery of these units, so some of them may recover. The Prussians, there are still some full strength units. Others, however, have suffered a few hits and are quite reduced. I think these guys are down to 3 increments here. They're down to 6. They're okay. They're just losing a bit of order in their advance as they begin to move through these towns. They're kind of losing formation, becoming a bit messy. and they're about to hit part of the 43rd, which is shifted over to the right. You can see around here. So there's not much left of the 44th Division, which was defending this area. I don't know where they are actually. There's 1, 2, 3 here, a couple routed in the city here. That's pretty much all that's left of the 44th. This might be a remnant of the 44th out here as well. Yeah, we will see how things go. As I said, it's the end of the 10:20 a.m. turn. We are just on 10:40. All right, we're just on the end of the 10:40 a.m. turn, and it's been a bit of a mixed turn with some pros and cons for both sides. Out on the left here, on the sort of east side of Dresden, the Russians have begun their assaults with 2 infantry battalions hitting the French lines here, and having some success. They force a recoil on the French artillery, which eliminated those guns, forced them to the battery box, and the Russians have begun to press into the outskirts here. Further to the south, the Prussians also had some success, routing that French square. They're down to 1 increment anyway, but yeah, they were routed. And pushing through elsewhere, the Prussians are also buoyed at the end of this turn by some good recovery rolls. So you can see a lot of their units behind the lines now getting ready to renew the advance. They're pushing around, sorry, they've been bumped, around the Prince Anton Gardens. The French hold the palace here, which should hold pretty well. And the 43rd French division has moved up around this area here. But elsewhere, in the centre, so the Prussians and the Russians are slowly pushing in and feeling pretty good about what's happening around here. But in the centre, things aren't going too well, because I'm trying to advance with the Prussians out here on the left. This is Liechtenstein's light division. We've got the Austrians out on the right. But I'm having a lot of trouble with their guns. Every time this light division unlimbered their guns here, and we're almost immediately eliminated by artillery fire, French artillery fire. It's just hard to get these guns set up. These guns have a range of 14 and 8, and as soon as they get anywhere near these guns, they are fired upon, and well, the French roll pretty well, I guess, but it's just hard to advance against these French positions. Out on the right, the Austrians, you can see, advancing again, suffering some casualties. You can see some increment losses there, and they've lost a gun, artillery battery as well, which has gone to the battery box. So yeah, struggling in this advance, just hoping to get to these French lines as quick as possible, not be caught out in the open for too long, because the longer they are out here, the more they suffer from French defensive artillery fire. Out on the far right, there was the French decided to pull back their... With the Austrians moving up here, the French have decided to pull back from this position, perhaps with a view to threatening that Austrian flank. It's hard to cross this river here. There's the town and the bridges and so forth, a lot of bridges to get across. But they've made the effort, or a start, and in doing so, the Austrians responded by charging these French. The French had an opportunity reaction here, and it's fair to say they got the upper hand in the skirmishes that resulted. I think they forced basically the Austrian cavalry to recoil in both the fighting that took place there. Yeah, so a lot of casualties among the Allies. They are suffering very heavy casualties, but they are, over in the left here, making some progress against those French defensive positions. And a lot of troops coming up in the centre, very, very slowly. We don't have a lot of command points to spend, but they are slowly making their way towards those French lines.